If you're feeling overwhelmed, burned out, or you're just looking for ways to improve, I encourage you to start with one of these strategies and implement one of these systems. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick one thing, make it a habit, and then add on from there. Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Hey there, and welcome back to The PA is In. I'm Tracy Bingaman, your clinician career coach, speaker, and host of this show dedicated to helping healthcare providers to thrive, not just survive in their careers. If you are new here, welcome, and to my loyal listeners, thank you for tuning in again. I'm thrilled to dive into today's episode because we are talking about something that is close to my heart: how you as a healthcare provider can make your life, career, and experience with patient care so much better. Not through big systemic changes in the healthcare system, but through personal daily actions that add up together in big ways. So today we're focusing on 5 things you can do to start thriving as a provider. Whether you're feeling overwhelmed, burned out, or you just want to fine-tune your daily routines, these 5 tips will help. Ready to dive in? Let's get started with the first strategy. Number 1, set clear boundaries with work hours. One of the biggest challenges that healthcare providers face is that our work can feel endless. There's always another patient, another chart, another to-do, another shift, another day of call, another in-basket message, another patient needing to be called. But here's the truth. You have to set boundaries with your work. Boundaries when it comes to the hours that you spend at work, and boundaries that help you from working too much or ideally at all when you are home. I used to be plugged into work around the clock. I would see patients all day, and when I got home, I would be checking charts, constantly checking the update emails from the surgeons, and my brain would never be fully off. I felt like I was always working, always on. And it got to the point where I was constantly drained mentally and physically, and I realized that I couldn't sustain it. I needed to draw a line between work and my personal life. The other thing that I found was that I didn't have good boundaries about a cutoff time. When I was doing inpatient rounding and people would call or follow up on notes or issues, I didn't have a clear cutoff time when those things would start to be going to the call person in the evening. So here's what I did. I set firm start and stop times. When I leave my office now, I'm done for the day. But that doesn't happen in isolation. It only works if you have time to see the patients, to answer the questions, to do the documentation, and to make those phone calls throughout the day. These things obviously have to be done, although I would like to add a caveat that they don't necessarily need to be done by you, and there may be some things on your plate that could be done by someone else. So in order to do that, I adjusted my template and the schedule of the patients that I was seeing throughout the day. I created a system for documentation that meant that my notes got done ideally as I go and as I see patients throughout the day, or at a minimum, that my morning notes are done by midday, and that my afternoon notes are done before I leave the office to go home. Now, don't get me wrong, this was not something that happened overnight. It took a lot of intentionality and planning with the team and with the people who make the template to make sure that the workload was manageable. Now, when I am at home, my family gets my intention. unless I'm reading a book, which is something that I actually enjoy being quote unquote distracted by. So my personal time is just that. It's now personal. This creation of boundaries with work made a world of difference for my energy and focus, both at work and at home. Now, when I'm at work, I don't feel badly giving 100% because I know that it's contained within the hours and the boundaries that I have set around work. I think of the boundaries as the walls that contain something. Boundaries help to keep work out of my personal life, but they also help to keep me in my life and work where it belongs inside my life as a relatively smaller part of the big picture of my life. And guess what? When I started being present at work and at home, when I was intentional about building boundaries in between the two things, I didn't feel less productive. In fact, I think it held me accountable to become more efficient because I knew I had a hard stop at the end of the day, that I wasn't taking my laptop home, or that I wouldn't be cracking my laptop to do that charting in the evening. These enforceable boundaries make me less likely to procrastinate. I'm not saying that I never procrastinate anymore, but I know I'm not taking the work home, but I also know that the work needs to be done, which kind of holds my feet to the fire. This means that instead of picking up my phone to sort of scroll aimlessly or look at something in between patients, I do my note, I sign my chart, I review the labs, I write the scripts, I put the orders in, I update the plan. I do all the things that I need to do in order to get that note completed, signed, finished, and off of my to-do list. I've said it before and I will say it again. I think that boundaries are so powerful, so much so that I think boundaries are the antidote to burnout. If you don't have any, this is your sign to build some, to enforce the ones that you've always dreamed of having, and to change your culture at work by going first. If you happen to work somewhere that boundaries are rare or unpopular right now. Number 2, practice reflective journaling. Boundaries are the hard skill set in terms of setting them, enforcing them, communicating to them to those around you. And this next system to have in place is a little less hard hitting. It's a softer skill, if you will. Hang with me. It's the practice of reflective journaling. So, this second strategy is reflective journaling. And I know it may sound a little cliche, but trust me, there is something powerful about taking just a few moments each day to reflect on your experiences. Journaling is something that I've done with some regularity, with some fits and starts, off and on, since I walked through burnout years ago. I love that moment of pause. As a clinician, it can feel like something is constantly needed of us. Someone who slips into that open slot on your schedule, a day where you have zero no shows, and that there are these results that just keep filling up your in basket again and again and again. From work to home, there are what feels like demands on top of demands. And in that setting and in that feeling of feeling pulled in all these different directions, journaling is something that you can do simply for you. I started journaling at what I would consider a relatively low point in my life and in my career. I started spending just 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of each day writing down my thoughts. Now, I know some people will journal in the evening. I find for me in the evening, I don't have the focus, the time, or the clarity to do it in the evening. So I do mine in the morning. I try to look back on the day that passed, so yesterday, and ask myself questions like, how am I doing? What's going well? What's not going so well? What types of things are energizing me? What things are draining me? What do I want to change going forward? It was this journaling habit that started out as a simple process with some relatively basic prompts, but I found it to be incredibly grounding, and I love starting my day this way. When I was in the depths of burnout, journaling was something of a touchstone. We just finished watching football. Not a touchdown, a touchstone for me. It centered me in the mornings. It helped me to focus on the day to come. And it was this time where I could look back on the day before and look at things that were thriving or also identify places where I was simply surviving or barely getting by or totally failing. So here's the thing about journaling. It is not about you writing the next great American novel or having this memoir. Like, it doesn't have to be pretty or polished. It's not for anyone else. It's not like me sitting down to draft one of these podcast episodes. It's not something that is meant to be consumed by others. But by journaling, you're creating space to reflect, to take some time to learn from your day, to be intentional, and to plan for the next day. So when it comes to journaling, you can ask yourself things like, what went well today? What's energizing me right now? What is draining me? What was challenging about today? How did I show up well for my patients? How did I show up for my family? How did I show up for myself? And this is one of my favorite prompts, but if I could live today twice, what would I do differently? So I do that one in the morning, and it helps me to think about potential things that I might not do well and refocus my energy and just remind me that I have the power to look forward and say, here are some things that might not go super smoothly. Here's some things that I could do differently and be proactive about going forward. Over time, doing these journaling practices, I started to notice some patterns, both positive and negative. So I would look back on a week or 7 to 10 days and see what was coming up in repetition, what I would see as a pattern, particularly those things like the energizing or the draining questions, and look and summarize like what has been going well, what hasn't been going well, what do I need more of, what do I need less of. That reflective journaling gave me insight into areas that I needed to improve, and it also helped me to recognize my successes and the progress that I was making. If you want to see yourself grow and change as a person, journal for a decent amount of time, like 6 months to a year. I think that these growths are something that we often overlook as providers, and we're sort of constantly raising the bar for ourselves for what's expected of us. And that growth for me was somewhat of a lifeline when I was in that season of burnout. You, my friend, do not need to go out and buy a fancy new journal or colored gel pens. But who remembers those sparkly gel pens in like a pastel color from middle school or high school that we used to use to doodle and do like MASH in our Lisa Frank notebooks with multicolored animal print? You don't need to go out and buy anything new to start journaling. Any notebook will do, any papers that you have on hand. Sometimes I journal. I have these little, my mother-in-law gave me these little, it's like a notebook of, I think it's like scrapbook paper, but they're patterned on the front, but they're white on the back. So sometimes if I'm in a pinch, I don't have my journal with me, I will just jot down some things, date it, and throw it in a folder. You could do this digitally. So you could do this in a Google Doc, although I do think there's something cool about actually writing it down on a pen and paper. Or if you're on the run, you could use the Notes app in your phone and just write down a couple of things about the day, a couple of things about how you're doing. Find a time in the day that works for you to reflect and jot a couple of notes down for yourself and focus on some of those patterns that you spot and sort of holding yourself accountable to making incremental improvements in those areas that you're struggling, or to focus positive energy on those areas where you're doing well over time. Confidence is so important in life, at work, and in business. And there is one thing I did years ago that skyrocketed my confidence. Feeling good makes such a difference in the way that we show up in the world. The Confidence Booster, one of the biggest ones ever, was a virtual color consult with Created Colorful. You sign up, tell them about yourself in a quick questionnaire, and then you take photos of yourself, no makeup, with natural lighting and various colors of fabric draped across your chest. Send in all those photos and one of the virtual color specialists reviews them. They send you an email with details on your season, your ideal colors, and knockout colors that are unique to you. Let me tell you, when I sit down behind this podcast microphone to record a video and I'm wearing a top in one of my knockout colors, I feel like an entirely different person. Add in some lipstick in my color palette, and it's the chef's kiss of confidence and self-care. Use the discount code Tracy or the link in the show notes for $20 off any consult, gift consult, or bundle. And get ready to boost your confidence and simplify your wardrobe. Number 3, prioritize physical activity. Now, let's talk about something that is absolutely essential, but often pushed aside as providers: physical activity. I know that we're busy. I know that you're prioritizing everyone else's health and wellness potentially above your own. But making time for exercise isn't just about staying fit, it's also about keeping your mind sharp, your mental health in a positive trending space, doing things like reducing stress and improving your overall mood. And please don't get stuck on that word exercise and think that it has to be structured, sweating, high intensity exercise. It can truly be any movement that brings you joy. I'll be the first to admit that at one point, I was not taking care of my body the way that I should have been. I would go days, sometimes weeks, without meaningful physical activity. Why? Well, I was burned out. I was too exhausted to do the exercise that might have energized me, and the cycle continued to spiral in the exact wrong direction. And you know what happened during that season of no movement? I felt sluggish, both mentally and physically unwell. I realized that if I wanted to be one of the best providers for my patients, if I wanted to show up well for my family, if I wanted to be strong myself, that I had to find a way to prioritize my own health. So I started small. I committed to walking more during work. I did small things like taking the stairs. I walked the long way around the nurse's station to get to room 238. I would, embarrassment be damned, do a couple of squats between progress notes or lunges down the hallway between exam rooms and my charting station. I sometimes still do that at my current office, and my doctors just sort of shake their heads because they know that this is just normal for me. I call them these small exercise or movement snacks that helped me to feel like I was doing something positive, like I was getting the blood flowing, like I was refocusing. And those simple acts of moving my body in a little bit more of a way that was more strenuous than walking would give me this little boost of energy. It also helped me to sleep better, which meant that I was less likely to snooze my alarm, which meant that I would get up and my morning routine would actually happen. And then eventually, that morning routine would include exercise of some sort. If you happen to be listening to this and you are a mom or a dad who finds themselves on the sidelines of various sporting or extracurricular activities, and you are running that parent taxi service from one place to another, is there a way that you can move your body around the field, in the parking lot, in the waiting room, or the hallway of your kids' activities? I recently started walking around the field when one of my kids was at practice. We have a kid that plays on the playground and a kid that plays at practice. And I would walk around the field often after dinner, get some movement in, listen to a podcast or an audiobook, or maybe even just some music, depending on my mood or state of mind. And that has been something that I feel like, first of all, helps to model that to my kids that it's not just about them exercising and I'm sitting there while they're exercising, but I'm also moving my body, and gives my mind an opportunity to decompress after a work day or after, the crazy afternoon shuffle with kids. Which reminds me that this should be it shouldn't feel like punishment for you to move your body. It shouldn't feel like one more item on your to-do list. And if it does, can you find ways to add joy to your movement? If you are doing movement in a stationary setting, like on a treadmill or a stationary bike, can you marry a quote unquote bad habit or a guilty habit, like watching your favorite Netflix show? I'm a big fan of Love is Blind. You can come for me in the comments. I don't actually think there are comments to podcast episodes, but some like garbage show that I would not normally watch with Dan. But if you can marry one of those like guilty pleasures, right? Which I don't even really like that phrase because we don't really need to feel guilty about things that bring us pleasure. But alas, a guilty pleasure. Can you marry a guilty pleasure or bad habit with a good habit of moving your body. And that gives you something to look forward to in terms of listening to or watching something that brings you joy while you're moving your body, hopefully in a way that also brings you joy. But this can sort of start to establish those habits of movement and have it be positive. So once I saw the benefits of these movements, I made it a habit. And now I really try to prioritize regular physical activity, whether it's triathlon training or walking at work or choosing the stairs or parking further away, doing things like yoga or stretching or movement practices, or a quick home workout with weights or on the stationary bike. I want to clarify here that the benefits for me of physical activity were not massive weight loss or getting crazy toned. You will not find me posting before and after pictures of like a ripped new body. It was simply that I felt 1% better, that I was healthier, that I was less stagnant, that I was moving in a positive direction, and that I felt like I was physically moving and doing things that made me feel better instead of worse. Have you ever felt that difference in your energy and mood when you move and prioritize physical activity? Give those little movement snacks a try and start moving your body with regularity, because I'm here to tell you that other people's health, it does matter, but it isn't worth the sacrifice of your own. And prioritizing movement is so, so important if you're thinking, I want to be thriving instead of just surviving. PAs, you're dedicated to improving the lives and health of your patients for a brighter future. But what about your future? Who's dedicated to helping you with your financial health so that you can live the future you dream of? Meet Caleb Pepperday, certified financial planner and owner of Advanced Practice Planning. Caleb is the husband of a PAC himself and has seen firsthand the challenges PAs face when it comes to finances. This fueled his mission to ensure that physician assistants get the respect, guidance, and treatment they deserve to build the future they want. Don't risk facing retirement with too little in your accounts or giving up on your dreams for the future, and work with an advisor who understands the unique challenges of being a PA. Gain insights into what your retirement could look like with access to the proper guidance. As a listener of and a featured guest on this podcast, Caleb's made available a free guide to help you prepare for retirement. Check out the link in the show notes to get your free guide and learn more about how advanced practice planning can help secure your financial future. Number 4 is to master efficient documentation techniques. If there is one thing that all healthcare providers can relate to, it's documentation, and that documentation sucks. And that documentation never ends. What you need when it comes to documentation is a system that works for you. You need charting to be an oh, by the way, not the main element of your patient care, of your day. Charting can feel super heavy and dreadful and sort of fraught with pitfalls. Unfortunately, being good and efficient at charting is a necessary evil in almost all settings of clinical medicine. But here's the deal. There are ways to master efficient documentation techniques that don't involve charting at home or staying after your shift to get all of your notes done, or sacrificing the quality of your notes in the interest of getting that chart closed and on to the next patient, the next note, the next chart, or the next in basket or lab result. I am old enough to have been practicing medicine long enough to remember what it was like to have a handwritten soap note. We had handwritten soap notes, and we had a dictated, like, call a phone number and leave a message for a physical transcriptionist who listened to and typed up our notes for H&Ps and discharge summaries and operative notes at the time. For all the potential problems that handwritten notes and orders had, there was something so great about these notes, because the expectation with those notes wasn't that every single piece of data in the EMR was documented in every single note. We would write abnormal vitals. We'd probably write all the vitals, and we would write abnormal labs or notable findings, but we didn't have this template of pulling in all the data of I's and O's and vitals and lab results and imaging results overnight. And in this way, I feel like electronic medical records are both a blessing and a curse. And that when we're using EMR, the burden of documentation is heavier now than it has ever been before. And I don't think that's going anywhere, right? Maybe some technology will help to lighten that burden slightly. But what we need as providers in order to thrive in this area of documentation is a system to use the EMR to our advantage. Yes, I am indeed talking about things like templates and order sets and smart phrases and using dictation to help with charting. So, here are a few things that you need to become efficient and a master of charting. First is a system for chart prep. If your practice is set up that this is helpful and you know who you're seeing in advance, that you can prep notes or see updates or look at visits and see the things that have happened to your patients since the last time they saw you, super important. And then during the visit, you need a process for how you add notes and data to the patient chart during the visit. Do you chart in the room? Do you take notes as the patient is providing their history? Do you chart the exam and the orders before the patient leaves the exam room, before they leave the office, before they check out? It doesn't matter so much how you do it, but that you consistently chart as you go and that you get the notes done so they don't add up or stack up at the end of the shift or at the end of the day. Personally, for me, I try to finish all my charts at the end of a long day. So that's how I used to do it. I would see everyone and then I would sort of start the notes. I now more batch my documentation. Ideally, after each patient, I complete and sign the note. But worst case scenario, or if I'm running behind, I batch morning and I batch afternoon. But I really try to break it up into smaller chunks, like every 2 to 4 visits or every hour. I add the details to my notes. I check my work to make sure that the orders have been placed and that appropriate follow up is in the note. It's hard to explain, but I'll do my best here. I have the MA prints a schedule for the day on paper, and we both make some notes on the sheet regarding sort of chart prep, the reason for the visit. Mine might be a little more detailed. And then I have a tracking system. So when I see the patient, I draw a circle underneath their name and I add any handwritten notes that aren't in the chart yet. If there's something I sort of thought of them saying or adding to the note for detail that isn't in the note, and then I check off that circle when the note is complete and signed and all of the orders are placed. If there's anything I have to do sort of outside the normal workflow, I'll jot it down right next to their note. That way, when I'm running through the day, I see patient name, that their note is done, and then if there's any sort of pending things that I wanted to check on, follow up on, put in the note. And then when I check them off, then they're completely done. The next tool is voice dictation. In particular, that has been a game changer for me. When I was still practicing inpatient, Dragon was my best friend. I could finish notes so much faster, and it cut significantly down on the time that I spent typing out details that I could just speak aloud, dictate into the chart. I am what I think is a pretty fast typer, but I can speak quicker. And I always got this little kick out of telling my kids that I had a dragon at work and that I was learning how to train my dragon. They really loved that when they were younger. So I looked this up because I wanted to make sure that it was in fact faster. When I was drafting this podcast episode, I went online and took a typing test on the internet to see what my words per minute is. And not to brag, but I apparently can type 90 words per minute with pro level accuracy. This was from a free test on the internet, so take that for what it's worth. By comparison, the average rate of speech for English speakers speaking non-medical jargon is 150 words per minute. That probably means that almost certainly when you're using a reliable microphone, a software that you've trained that's pretty accurate, you're going to chart faster with dictation than you are with typing. The next thing is formatting. How you build your notes matters. When you are consistent about how you chart, from the way that you bullet or number your assessment and plan, how you enter your orders, you gain speed and efficiency in charting based on that consistency. You aren't forever having to recreate the wheel each time you do a note for that patient or each time you do a note for that type of visit. Now, the next thing I'm going to touch on is AI, or artificial intelligence. Now, depending on your employer's policies and compliance, consider leveraging tools like AI apps or technology to help you with your charting. Freed AI is a great example of an app that can help turn your conversations into done for you and formatted notes inside of your EMR. Now, this is something that you have on your phone, that you take in the room, that you get permission from the patient, and then it drafts part of your note or the lion's share of your note based on that conversation and interaction. As a sponsor of this show, you can use the code PA50 for $50 off your first month with Freed AI if that is something that you want to try to improve your charting efficiency. So let's face it, as much as we wish it weren't true, charting isn't going anywhere. But all of these things can help you to make it suck a little less. Choose one or two and integrate it regularly into your charting and see if you improve your efficiency. Keep an eye on things that you are doing repeatedly, types of notes, smart phrases, order sets, and determine how to be more efficient with that particular thing. The fifth system to have in place is to develop a daily debrief ritual. This is last but certainly not least. One of my favorite strategies is having a debrief ritual. You can use it post-work or at the end of a long day. You can use it after a particularly difficult stretch of patience or hard interaction with family members. It's simple, but it's also incredibly effective as a way to end your day, your shift, your week, and to do those things with intention and clarity. For me, the debrief is this opportunity to have a few minutes or even just moments of quiet reflection where I think about what just happened. It's kind of like the journaling ritual that we talked about earlier, but done on the fly. I often do it in the car, and it helps me to mentally close out my workday and leave everything at the clinic so I can fully switch into home mode when I walk through the door. You can use it in any of those transitions, and I'm oftentimes driving from one thing to another, so it helps me to do it in the car. So here's an example of a 1 minute post shift debrief. So, first thing you want to think about is successes. Note one thing that went well, and then challenges. What's one challenge that you faced? And then your feelings. Check in on your emotions. Are you feeling happy, relieved, stressed, satisfied? And next steps. Write down one thing that you can do to improve your next shift or your next day. This practice not only helps with things like work-life balance, but also helps you to move in a positive direction over time. Sometimes the smallest reflection can lead to big improvements with how you approach work, interact with patients, speak to yourself, relate to your friends and family. There is something so satisfying for our brains that when we do something like intentionally debriefing, we close the door on what happens. It isn't something that continues to bleed into the rest of our day and overnight and into the next day and so on and so on. It ties it up in a nice little bow in our minds so you can move on to the next activity with some focus and be present where you want to be. So there you have it. 5 actionable strategies to help you thrive as a healthcare provider. That's to set clear boundaries, to practice journaling, to move your body, chart efficiently, and debrief intentionally. As I said, these aren't massive system overhauls. It can feel overwhelming to think about the healthcare system at large, but these are 5 small intentional actions that you can integrate into your daily routine. If you're feeling overwhelmed, burned out, or you're just looking for ways to improve, I encourage you to start with one of these strategies and implement one of these systems. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick one thing, make it a habit, and then add on from there. Before you know it, you'll be feeling more energized, focused, and fulfilled in your career. As always, if you have enjoyed this episode, share it with a colleague, leave a review, and let's continue this conversation over on social media. LinkedIn is my favorite place to hang out these days. Until next time, don't forget to take care of yourself because you are worth it. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.